Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time this morning to join our webcast. As advertised, this is focused on Skype for Business and specifically around Cloud PBX. Although, actually, it's very difficult to talk about some of the advantages of Cloud PBX without actually referencing some of the advantages of Skype for Business generally, because the same arguments around flexibility, remote working, communication, collaboration, pretty much spans across the whole set of the workloads that we have in Skype for Business. Just by way of introduction, my name is David Hipwell. I'm an Office 365 specialist here at Rizhal. Prior to joining Rizhal, I was at Microsoft for 9 years, and 4 of those actually in the Skype for Business part of the organisation. So I'll be heading up the first section of our webcast today. I've got Corey Goodchild and Brian Kane with me today. Corey, would you just like to quickly introduce yourself?
Good afternoon or good morning. Thanks for taking the time to join us. So yeah, as David said, my name's Corey Goodchild. I'm a part of the Unified Communications team, so I'm one of the lead consultants that primarily deals with everything Skype for Business and Office 365.
Lovely, thank you. Brian?
Hi there, my name's Brian Kane, so I manage our business group at Rizhal, and I'm really responsible for anything that's large and complex that Rizhal gets involved in, so I look after all the enterprise architects and the engagement managers.
Lovely, thanks Brian. So I've just put the agenda up for this morning's meeting. Introductions we've just done. I'm going to give a very brief overview of Rizhal in case people are not familiar with Rizhal. Going to give a quick run through of Skype for Business, including some of the latest developments. Then we're going to dive into the top 10 of business benefits, and then I'm going to hand over to Corey, who's going to do the top 10 for considerations around deploying Cloud PBX. But once again, a lot of these points are relevant for Skype for Business generally. We're going to make some suggested next steps, and then we'll open the floor to any questions and answers you may have. And this could be anything around business benefits, around deployment, around training, user adoption, etc. It could be anything you like. Just a bit of housekeeping first of all. If you do have questions during the session, if you could submit them using the I am functionality in your window, you should see a little cloud bubble down on the left hand corner. Or alternative, as I said, we'll open the floor up at the end. So if you want to ask it yourself in person, that's absolutely fine. We would ask if everybody mutes the phone, but I think Molly's keeping an eye on making sure that happens. Just keep the background noise down. And just as a heads up, we are recording today's session. So if you need to pass it on to your colleagues, it will be available on our YouTube channel. So just a quick introduction to Rizhal. Couple of points to make here. Rizhal is a Microsoft only deployment partner, so we only deploy Microsoft technology. We don't get involved in anything else. And also we deploy across the whole of the Microsoft stack. So although we're looking at one particular part of our unified communications practice here today, we do in fact deploy across the whole of the whole of the stack. So in terms of getting multiple products and multiple solutions working together, it's our bread and butter. We do it on a day-to-day basis. One of the key things we're aiming to do, and I know this from my time at Microsoft, is that people make a sizable investment in their enterprise agreement. They want to get the most out of their technology. You're not going to get the most out of it if you're not actually deploying the technology. So we're talking about leveraging the value from your investment in Microsoft technology. As it says there in the black box, we're a tier 1 managed partner across Office 365 Azure and on-premise. We were the UK Country Partner of the Year last year, and previously we were finalists in 2012, 2013. And we do have a smart teaming agreement with MCS, so we're often finding that we will get involved in work that they're doing to do the heavy lifting or do some of the architectural stuff, just get involved in what they're doing. So in terms of how our business is structured, we're basically split into 3 major areas. We've got the consulting arm, which is really our deployment arm. We've got our services area, which is proactive and reactive support. So typically this will be supporting a deployment we have done, but it doesn't have to be. We sometimes take on deployments that other partners have done, or if MCS has done it, or if the customer's done it themselves. And then the third part of this is our solution. So we're basically developing our own IP, and this is mainly focused around different vertical solutions. So we have a retail solution, we have Minerva 365, which is across the board for an organization. We have a justice solution as well. So very much taking the Microsoft stack, making it relevant for a particular vertical, and then offering that out to different customers. If I just go back to the consulting part, we got two bits to that, the technology part and the business part. Technology part is very much focused on individual point solution deployments. So somebody will come to us and say, you know, can you deploy Skype? Can you deploy Exchange? Can you move us to Office 365? And the technology part will take a lead, and Corey sits within the UC messaging part, which you can see there. The business group, which is headed up by Brian, is basically made up of a bunch of architects and project managers, or engagement managers as we call them here, and the part that the group very much focuses on bringing together multiple pieces of technology to work for a single solution. So if I skip on to the next slide, these are the kind of areas that we're getting involved in: connected business, end-user computing, and optimized service vision. So the focus of these is slightly different, although there will inevitably be some overlap between them. Connected business is looking at providing the right information to the right people at the right time on the right device. So think of a Power BI situation. People want to understand the information that's contained in line of business applications or in Excel spreadsheets, more commonly in sort of a public sector scenario, surfacing that information so it's very easy to understand. End user computing is where Skype would traditionally sit, and this is about modernizing the desktop, refreshing the desktop, introducing mobile flexible working. And then there's optimized service vision, which is concentrating on the data center side of things. So moving people to Azure, potentially moving people to a hybrid environment, or maybe the answer is actually on-premises is the right answer for you. So those are the bigger transformational pieces that we engage in, and Brian heads up that particular group. So that's by way of introduction to Visual. By way of introduction, I suppose, to Skype for Business, to make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to look at these four areas briefly. Skype for Business is a complete meeting solution. We're talking about modern voice, which we'll go into a lot more detail. We're talking about Skype across devices to ensure that we have that flexibility of working, and if people want to use Android devices, iOS devices, we're taking care of that. And then we're looking at operator services as well. So let's start with a complete meeting solution. So as I'm sure most people know, even if you're not familiar with Skype for Business in a business environment, in an enterprise environment, you're probably familiar with Skype as the consumer version. So basically, it's a way of bringing together lots of different modalities, lots of different workloads into one single platform. So we're talking about video, we're talking about desktop sharing, web conferencing, audio conferencing, bringing it all together onto one single platform. Microsoft released in December of last year PSTN conferencing for Office 365. So this gives you the ability to dial in and out of a Skype meeting just using your phone. So if it's not convenient for you to join a full Skype meeting, or you don't have the capability to join a full Skype meeting, you can just join into the audio part of the call. And what they've done with that is they've introduced that as an all-you-can-eat package. So the functionality is there. You can use it as much as you like, and it's a fixed fee per month in order to use it. So very, very flexible. So it sort of goes against the traditional model of per user per minute charging that typically exists, and the return on investment for that is big. They've also introduced Skype meeting broadcast. This is for larger audiences, up to 10,000 people. So if you want to, for example, to address your whole organization, you could use it on you could use Skype meeting broadcast. The difference here is that it gives reduced functionality to the participants, so they would automatically be on mute as they join the organization. They can't take over as presenters, so it's just an easier way to control a large number of people in a meeting scenario. Modern voice for the cloud. I'll skip over this one a little bit because we will go into this a bit more detail. We're talking about making, receiving, transfer calls in the office, at home, or on the road. Basically, wherever you are, you should be able to receive your call if you're using Skype for Business, Enterprise Voice, or Cloud PBX. It interoperates with existing assets. So Microsoft released PSTN calling at the beginning of June. Beginning of June, which basically meant that you could take your carrier services, your telecom services directly from Microsoft. So what that means is you can now provision numbers or port your numbers into Office 365, and you can call out directly from Office 365 out to the PSTN. The other option that people had up until that point, or you still have that option, but the only option available was the hybrid option. So you would have to actually connect to a piece of on-premise equipment to get out to PSTN. You couldn't go out directly from Office 365 out to the PSTN. So we're now in a situation whereby you can potentially take everything from Microsoft itself. Obviously, we're talking about Office 365, and we're talking about provisioning and the speed of provisioning. But we'll come back onto that in a little bit time. In-app integration, this has been around for a while. So I mean, if you've ever used SharePoint where you've had Skype lit up, you know, people's presence, contact information bubbles up in those applications, and you're able to call directly from those applications or communicate directly from those applications. Obviously, that's open to third-party applications through APIs, so people can develop it. So they're linked in. So you don't have to keep returning back to the Skype client in order to make those different forms of communication. Skype for Business, mobile apps now available across Windows, Android and iOS, so giving people that flexibility to use what they want. We're also, I'm sure most people have heard now of Surface Hub, and bringing that experience in. I know there's a bit of a delay in fulfilling those orders, but I think they're gradually getting over that. Basically, it's designed to work with Skype for Business. It's a room-based system. It's a big screen with cameras and microphones to boil it down to what it is. But the interoperability and the ease of use with the Office suite, it takes it to a different level. If you have made an existing investment in some video conferencing, some room conferencing solutions, Project Rigel is in preview at the moment, and Project Rigel will basically take a Windows 10 device and allow you to have a similar experience on your existing equipment through a Windows 10 device that's based in the room itself. So there will be that sort of interoperability. There will be the ability for people to use that functionality with existing equipment. Now, there's obviously going to be some caveats around that of what you can use it with and the scenarios you can do it, but the aim of that is to replicate the Surface Hub environment onto an existing infrastructure. So that may be worth something to look at. So Project Rigel is R-I-G-E-L. Operator Microsoft Services, we touched on this very briefly. Get your calling services. So you can currently get it from your telco, or you can get it from Microsoft, so you have the choice. And sometimes you may not have the choice because you may be locked into a contract with the telco, so you may have to continue to use that. But if you do have the choice, you now have the ability to take it directly from Microsoft. As I said, the calling plans are available directly from Office 365. And Corey will touch on this. You know, we make a strong recommendation around using ExpressRoute for Office 365. You know, voice is an enterprise class solution, and you should make sure that you have the infrastructure in place to support that. So ExpressRoute for Office 365. So Corey, as I said, we'll touch on that in a little bit. So let's just skip on to the top 10 business benefits. Brian, at this point, if you want to dive in any time, that'd be great.
Yep, yeah, no worries.
I've put the little note on there. Some of these are relevant to Skype for Business generally, but I did think it was worth pulling these out as well. So let's have a look at the first ones, and I hope this doesn't come across as a list because that'll be a bit dull. So the first thing is we're obviously talking about a cloud-based piece of technology. So straight away we're talking about things being able to be implemented very, very quickly and very, very simply. And to kind of reinforce that, we also have a single client on the desktop. So we're not asking people to sign into multiple different platforms. We're not asking people to learn multiple different things and go on training courses for different things. We've got one single client and we've got one single implementation in the cloud. So the idea is, you know, we're getting away from that model whereby you have a large piece of tin sat in your offices that somebody with specialist knowledge needs to go and administer and needs to support and needs to maintain, needs to add people onto it. It's very, very simple to get this stuff up and running. You obviously need to spend some time, and once again, Corey will touch on this. You do need to spend some time around user adoption. You need to spend some time just making sure people are familiar with it, how to use it, how to get to it. What we have generally found is that as soon as somebody has deployed Skype for Business, it spreads virally within an organization. People are pushing at the barriers. You might start by introducing IM and presence to start with, and you'll soon find that people are coming to you. Actually, I've seen that Joe down the corridor has suddenly got access to being able to share his desktop. Can I have that? Can I have that? So people adopt this technology very quickly, but you have to help them on that for that first bit of the journey.
It's probably worth mentioning there, isn't it? You said that sort of the skills required to implement telephony traditionally has always been, they've been difficult to come by, or perhaps expensive to procure, or telephony projects seem to span a long time. Skype for Business, using Microsoft technologies, you're probably a lot easier to get hold of those skills and generate a lot quicker to be able to deploy them. And so, the speed of deployment in terms of Skype for Business versus the standard PBX is generally a lot quicker. Obviously, cloud PBX is even quicker still, because the technology is there. It's very much using the cloud model, where we're just switching on these services for the users that want it.
Yes, exactly. So it is moving around from telephony being a black art to being telephony part of a larger solution, a larger IT solution.
Absolutely.
Low upfront investment. We obviously had to pull this out. I mean, if you have bought an on-premise PBX from Cisco or Mitel or an Avaya, these things can run into hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not more. So very, very expensive. Obviously, with the model, particularly around cloud PBX, you're almost renting the technology. So there is no upfront cost in order to take that on. You obviously have to deploy it, and there is an investment needed in that. But in terms of taking the solution itself, you're paying for it as you go, and we'll come back to that in a minute.
Sorry, David. Again,
no,
if you're looking to sort of to expand into a new office, as an example, the speed to get that office up and running in terms of telephony in the past, you speak to a telco and they'll get a line into the office, within a few months, and within about 6 months you might have some telephony in there. All those things that have to, there's a sequence of event that needs to take place in order to get telephony into an office, and using your DDIs and all that sort of thing. That kind of goes away when you move into a cloud-based solution, because essentially, the lines are already into Microsoft Office 365, and all you need to do is just have an internet connection to start to consume it, and that's generally a lot quicker to procure.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. And the other key point here is that, with that low upfront investment, it's also a rich functionality in the client itself. You're getting those multiple workloads in one single implementation. So it's not it just does one single thing and you're off. That obviously is going to lead to improved communication and collaboration. And where we're seeing, we're seeing that obviously, and we'll come on to this in a little bit, obviously replacing travel and people moving to meetings, but we're also finding that it's opening up other forms of communication that perhaps didn't happen before, or perhaps it's replacing other forms of communication. So you're not necessarily leaving a voicemail for somebody, you're actually getting in touch with them, you're tagging for status change alerts so you can see when they've come online, or it's making it easier to collaborate on a document. So in the past you may have thought, I could do with asking that question, but it's probably going to take a long time, I'll miss it. Actually, in the Skype world, he's online, I'll ask him a question. So it's opening up new forms of collaboration and communication. You do need to take a look at devices, but once again, Corey will come back to that as one of the key considerations of adapting this piece of technology. An important point here is around business continuity. So a classic example that we had over the winter months, a lot of flooding around the country, offices were shut. In a traditional model, people wouldn't have access to their phones, wouldn't have access to potentially PCs, wouldn't have access to the PBX, or the PBX may even be damaged or it was down. Business continuity is included here. You can work from where you want to work from. Because it's all cloud-based, it's not sat on your premise. The resiliency is built into that platform, so you can continue to work, you can continue to take calls, you continue to interact with people across the different workloads that we've discussed before. So business can continue, and this is all part of what Skype for Business is offering. This is all part of that new way of working. This is all part of the move away from being location dependent to being independent. Okay, today my situation has changed. However, I can continue to do what I was doing yesterday. I'm just sat in a completely different place.
I think one of the challenges that we hear from lots of customers there is, oh yeah, but if I'm moving to the cloud, then I'm absolutely reliant on the internet. And my internet connection becomes absolutely critical to my business, and I don't want to rely on that single connection just for my telephony. What you need to think about is an internet connection becomes important, absolutely, but not necessarily a specific internet connection. So in the example there that David's just mentioned around flooding, that sort of thing, as long as you've got an internet connection from somewhere, then you can get your telephony, you can get your services, and that so your premises could absolutely be flooded out, and everything's gone down in the office. But essentially, you could send everybody home as long as people have got an internet connection. They can continue to work, and so business continuity becomes much better.
Absolutely. So Brian touched on this earlier on, actually, about the solution can be scaled up and down very quickly. So we take an example of maybe a contact center. Suddenly they win a new contract. They've got to take on 200 new people. In the old days, they would have to go through the move, add, and change. They have to make sure they have enough phone lines. They would have to buy those phone lines. That contract may then be reduced or may finish, and they're still stuck with that old equipment. They're still stuck with the lines. These solutions could be scaled up and down very quickly, and you're only paying for what you're using. So if you have those 200 people, you pay for those 200 people, the 200 people left, and then licensing requirements and regulations, applicable here, but you can reduce that back down again. Move, add, and changes are simplified because it's just like dealing with an Office 365 account. You go on, provision the account, take the account back down again. It's not a complicated process at all. And once again, as Brian touched on earlier, there's no need for planning around lines and extensions. This is all internet-based communications. So this basically allows for flexibility within the organization. It allows you to pay for what you're actually using as opposed to being stuck with an infrastructure that's very difficult to manage and very difficult to support and very difficult to work with going forward. They are inflexible compared to how organizations like to work these days.
I think it's worth calling out at that point that telephony traditionally is expensive. It's an expensive old chunk. If you look at a standard organisation's telephony budget, it'll be a big old chunk of change. So there's a huge opportunity there for some significant cost savings. And if you're able to, if you've got a particularly seasonal organisation where perhaps you've got parts of the year which require additional capacity in terms of telephony, you really ought to only want to be paying for that at the time that you need it. You don't want to be paying for it all year round, and so there's some really good opportunities here for some significant business cost savings.
Absolutely. Now, we touched on it before, excellent support for mobile and flexible working. We couldn't really have a discussion around Skype without introducing this, because this is one of the fundamental game changers. People need to be very conscious around costs. And in a public sector, I mean, it's talked about an awful lot. Closing down potentially expensive middle of town, middle of city offices, allowing people that flexibility. But actually, being able to introduce flexible working helps with staff retention, work-life balance, general satisfaction of the job that you're doing, gives you the flexibility. I mean, my personal situation, I don't live anywhere near Stafford where our office is. But because I can work from home, I can still do the job that I would do even if I had to travel to Stafford. And because of that, it allows me to do the job. But actually, I find I'm generally more productive when I don't go to Stafford, because I don't get distracted with all the other noise that's going on in the background. As Brian said before, you need an internet connection. You can have an internet connection. You could potentially be sat, I don't know, you might be now sat in a Costa coffee shop watching this for all I know. But basically, if you have an internet connection, you can take part in a Skype meeting. You've got multi-channel working wherever you are, so we're not saying that if you are sat in Costa Coffee you can only do X, Y, and Z. All the functionality of Skype will be available for you. So you could be sat, I could be sat at home, could be sat at Stafford, could be sat in Costa Coffee. I'm able to do the same level of work that I do in any of those locations. It's very, very flexible in the way that you work. Mention travel costs and expenses. That, combined with improved communication, collaboration, and productivity, plus the office stuff, plus reduction in the purchase, support and maintenance of traditional PBXs stacks up to be a very, very good business case. And the other key point is the number follows you. So if I was sat in Costa Coffee, my Skype would ring. If my machine isn't on, I could have turned on simultaneous ringing or call forwarding, so it would forward through to my work device or it would forward through to my personal device. So that number is constantly following me. So if I'm traveling, I'm still able to get my calls. I'm still able to do what I need to do. Okay, and as Brian touched on before, simplifies office moves, mergers and acquisitions, and opening new offices. So in an office move, you would have to think about, oh, we've got to take that PBX, got to pick that up, take that somewhere else. Mergers, acquisitions, so two organisations coming together. What are we going to do? You know, they've got a PBX, we've got a PBX. How are we going to get those working together? Do we replace them? Do we all put them on the same one? Do we have to buy a new bit of equipment? Or if we're opening a new office, what are we going to do around telephony? We've got to think about the phone lines. We've got to think about the equipment. What are we going to do about it? All of this stuff is now taken care of because it's up there in the cloud. It's easy to provision the users. It's very easy to get organizations working together. What's also probably worth saying is around federation. So although you can see the presence, and people may be familiar with this, you can see the presence of people within your organization, you can federate with external organizations so you can see their presence as well. So we're federated with a lot of our customers, we're federated with Microsoft, and it allows us to interact with those people in exactly the same way as we interact with people within our own organization. So last couple, vendor consolidation. So in the past, you would have had to have a telephony contract, you may have an audio conferencing contract, you may have a web conferencing contract, you may have an instant message presence, you may even have a consumer instant message presence solution rolled out in your organization, which obviously raises questions around governance, etc. Vendor consolidation, you're bringing all those workloads together into one single package. So you only have to deal with one vendor, you only have to deal with one organization, you only have to support one solution. All of that is managed through a single directory, which is Active Directory, so you're not having to maintain something separate for your telephony system and something for your UC solution. You're managing everything through one single directory, so it makes it very simple. And in terms of the finance procurement function, predictable pricing, you're dealing with one bill, one invoice a month. You understand what people are using, you know what people are going to use, and it's very simple to control that going forwards.
I think it's, again, so with regards to sort of vendor consolidation, we're able to reduce the number of organizations that we're working with, but also we're able to drive value from the existing Microsoft licensing agreement that you've got. So, you know, if you've got a particular Microsoft license that includes the Skype for Business elements and particularly the voice elements, then you're just driving value out of that licensing agreement. You're getting as much of that capability from that license as you can, and you're able to reduce the amount of spend that you've got on third-party solutions to do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. No expensive on-site equipment we've touched on before. No need to purchase expensive hardware. Support and maintenance contracts are included because it's Office 365. They have a finance-backed SLA, so you know what to expect, and you know you've got some comeback on them. Constant innovation and updates are included in the offering. So it's going to be seamless, it's going to be continuing to innovate, it's going to be adding new features in all the time. So something we get asked about constantly is response groups. Those are coming August, September timeframe. So once we've got those in place, that's going to be a big thumbs up from a lot of people. And it allows you to concentrate on running your business and not a particular piece of technology. Reduction in telephony charges. Obviously, internal calls are now going to be taken care of. If you're federating, that's going to take care of those. If you're doing long distance calling, if it's through Skype, it doesn't matter. You're going to reduce phone line costs, and once again, you've got the predictable pricing. And as I said before, you have a choice around PSTN calling, and you've got PSTN conferencing. So you can decide, do I want to take my carrier services from Microsoft, or do I want to continue, or do I need to continue to take it from my telco provider? So you'll have a choice there. You have a choice as to how you want to run it. So I think that was my top 10 for the business benefits. So Corey, if I could hand over to you, if anyone's got any questions, then please stick them in the iron window. We'll pick them up at the end. Corey.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
thanks,
yeah,
David.
Yeah.
Right, so again, thanks for joining us, guys. Good afternoon and good morning, good evening, depending if you're joining from any other time zones. So what I wanted to talk about now was the top 10 kind of planning considerations. Now, There's a lot of planning that goes into the adoption of any new technology, and it's important that we do plan the solution adequately to make sure that we can drive that end user adoption, increase that usage, and realise the benefits from the solution that we originally invested in. When we look at the kind of cloud technologies and versus the on-premise technologies, it does free up a lot of our time. So we're no longer considering the significant on-premise infrastructures, and so as a prime example of that, in the past I've been worrying about Active Directory, SQL, certificates, Exchange services, IP connectivity, etc. All of that is taken away now, and it allows us to focus our efforts more on the operational side of things, and as David said, the end user adoption and just increasing that usage. So you'll see through some of the points that I'm going to address now, they are a lot less technical, and they are more so focused around ensuring that the end users feel empowered, ensuring that the adoption uptake is increased and maximised, and just making sure that we deliver an overall and good end user experience. So the first points that I wanted to discuss, and apologies that they are in the dull list format that David previously mentioned, because I haven't been quite as fancy with my transitions, but one of the first points that we must consider is the kind of site connectivity. So as David said, we need to make sure that we've got an internet connection to be able to deliver this service. Now, that isn't always the case, because if we are retaining any existing telephony lines, then of course our PSTN connectivity will be breaking out locally via our site. But if we are looking to adopt the Microsoft PSTN calling service, and we're looking to take our numbers away from any, say for example, BT, Virgin lines, and move them into the Microsoft trunk, then we do need to consider the fact that there's going to be a significant amount of calls being made over these internet pipes now. So making sure that we've got adequate bandwidth assigned to those internet pipes, dependent upon the kind of concurrency that we envisage and that we've planned for from the users, is critically important. I mean, if we've got multiple sites, then as David said, we can take advantage of the fact that if they've got local internet breakout, then we've got multiple ways to reach our data center and to reach our telephony services. If we don't have local internet breakout, or say for example the site is down, as previously mentioned, then of course anywhere that we do have that internet breakout, we can still retrieve our service. So the high availability, HA, and resilient aspects of the service are really second to none when you take these things into consideration.
Do you think, with regards to PSTN connectivity, if you sort of wind all the way back and take your Microsoft hat off for a minute and just think about telephony in general, lots of customers are still running sort of legacy ISDN connectivity to the PSTN. So it's really old school kind of 30-channel telephony connections. Yeah. And there's some real sort of, again, business benefits in terms of business continuity and cost benefits for moving those connections to SIP connections as a minimum, So it doesn't matter what you stick on the end of it, your telephony connection in terms of the PSTN. If you're going to retain them, you really ought to be thinking about SIP connections. And obviously that's what we're doing for some of our customers, and we're pushing that message as much as we can.
Most definitely.
With regards to the PSTN connectivity. So if you take anything away from today, that's sort of the first thing that you should be looking at, even if you decide actually that Skype for Business is not for me. You'd be a fool if you did that, but there we are. But PSTN connectivity, SIP connections, you need to be moving away from ISDN because there's some huge benefits there just on its own. It could be that actually you don't do SIP, you just move straight to Microsoft, and let Microsoft deal with all of that hassle.
And that was a point that I was going to make as well. So if you are using legacy lines, say for example DAS circuits, DPNSS, and a lot of that is still around in the public sector, now might be a good opportunity to take advantage of this and move away from those services, because we can expect to be paying high maintenance charges on PBXs and the termination equipment that is actually supporting those lines. So now might be the best time to take advantage of that, importing the numbers across to the Microsoft PSTN calling service. And again, it doesn't have to be, if you are looking to use the PSTN calling, you can Microsoft do allow you to dip your toe in the water, so you don't have to port an entire range. You can port single DDIs, you can port single numbers. numbers. So if you've got a main service DDI that's, say, being terminated on a contact center application that we can't yet replace, then we can leave that number as it is and and just basically port across the corporate telephony DDI, so just the back office staff end user DDI. So we've got flexibility around the numbers that we port. It doesn't have to be a big bang approach. It can be a big bang approach, but at this point now, it is probably the best time to start considering what you're doing with those lines and the kind of maintenance that you are paying on them.
It's a really good point, Corey.
So the next point that I wanted to bring up was just the fact that it kind of falls in line with the fact that we're no longer really heavily invested in the infrastructure changes, and we are looking at this more so from an operational perspective. So this allows us to actually have more time with the end users and spend more time with the end users. So understanding what they like about the current solution, understanding what they don't like about the current solution. The last thing that we would want to do is put a tick in every box for the features that they don't like and not be able to replace the features that they do like. So we want to understand the end user requirements and how they work, etc. But then articulating functionality that may not be there can be achieved in other ways. So as a prime example of that, Busy on Busy has now been introduced in the on-premise infrastructure, and we are waiting for it to find its way into the online service. But instead of using Busy on Busy, what we can look at doing is things like presence tagging. So rather than having to wait on the phone and wait for somebody to become free, etc., let's just be notified of when that person's available, because then we can expect a much richer engagement with that user, because that user is now available based on their present states. And it's just a case of using the technology and using the single client that we've got installed on our desktops, laptops and mobile devices.
So with regards to Busy on Busy then, Corey, just for people who don't understand what you mean there, how does that work? What is that?
So presence tagging in Skype for Business. So if I made a call into a user and that person is on the phone, how we are treated is fundamental. So are we put through to that user's voicemail? Are we given the option to jump on that user's presence to say that when that call is free, can we initiate the next call? Now in Skype for Business that isn't quite there, but we achieve that functionality in a different way. So we actually wait for that person's present state to change from in a call to become available, and then we can receive notification on our desktop. So it's a slightly different way of working, and the adoption from a pure telephony based solution into a unified communication solution that's delivered from the desktop, it is a significant cultural change for the end users. So again, it's just making sure that we educate the users, and you'll see one of my significant points is the training plan. So just making sure that we educate the end users and understand how they work at the moment, so we can translate that into the new solution as we roll it out.
Yeah, I guess the last thing you want is to roll out all this really cool technology that is going to enhance everybody's collaboration and communication capabilities without actually telling them how to do it.
Exactly.
Ultimately, they're just going to do what they've always done, but with the new technology, and they're never going to change the way in which they work. So
exactly.
It's a really important thing there to help people change, because that's how you're effectively going to transform your organization.
Most definitely, and like I say, the first point that I made was the fact that we don't have to spend so much time looking at certificates, looking at public DNS records, firewall ports, etc., etc. We do have more time to listen to the end users now. So just understanding, like I say, what they like, what they don't like, and how we can adapt anything that we can't replace on a one-for-one basis into the new functionality that's available within Skype for Business. And then as equally as important as if we listen to the end users, we've got to be able to basically record that experience and capture that experience and make it and record it in a documentable way that's easy to read back and deliver back in terms of functionality and features. So it's critically important to consider how you're actually going to capture the kind of end user experiences during that pilot rollout, during the initial pilot phases. The next point I wanted to bring up was it kind of falls nicely on from that previous point, but just an end user and device profiling exercise. So if anyone's been engaged in any on-premise enterprise voice deployments for Skype for Business, then you'll be more than likely familiar with this kind of exercise. But it typically consists of understanding how users work, where they work from, their concurrency of the system. So how often are they using the system? How many telephone calls are they making? Are those calls being made purely to national numbers? Are they being made to international numbers? Because with the Microsoft PSTN calling plan, there's two types of calling plans. So we've got national and international calling plans. So understanding who requires what is something that we would uncover during the user profiling exercise, and based on their work patterns and their communication habits, and to some degree their preferences themselves, that will actually dictate the kind of devices that we use. So from a device perspective, they are definitely a critical point, and I will touch a bit more heavily on them in the next slides. But the end user and device profiling exercise typically maps the types of user profiles that you've got in your organization to the devices that they're going to use and how they're going to use them. So are these users purely office-based? Do they work from home? Do they have flexible working available to them? Are they purely mobile workers? All of these points and all of these decisions will dictate the kind of devices and the permissions and functionality that the users are permitted to do. So the next point that I wanted to bring up was the Office 365 Express route. So as it's been touched upon throughout the webcast, this connectivity in the Cloud PBX, we achieve it over the internet. So all of the connectivity that we've got, it's going to be traversing the internet, and we can't actually manage the quality of service over this. The internet is an unmanaged connection. So to deliver that high-end media quality, what we do have to procure is what we call Office 365 Express route, which is effectively a private connection from your main data center sites, your MPLS, as an extension out to the Office 365 data center. So rather than us breaking out via the internet to retrieve our telephony services, we now basically traverse the private connection that we've got to the Office 365 data center, and that enables us to manage the end-to-end quality of service of the connection. The next point, end user training plans. So as David said, Brian said, we need to make sure that the end users know what they're using. We don't want to deliver a single client that can do a whole lot of functionality, but then have it overwhelm the users and then have none of the functionality used, and like Brian said, go back to the way that they used to work. So what we found works best is actually having training plans that are mapped to your user profiles. So performing that user profile and device exercise is crucial, but then we can also leverage that data and then create our own bespoke training plans to map to those user profiles. So let's focus on the functionality that they're going to be primarily using, and what we found is that natural absorption of the rest of the functionality within the client slowly comes. Word of mouth is powerful. When one person has shared a desktop and presented a PowerPoint file, you can soon be reassured that the rest of the department will be doing it already. And of course, if you're already using Skype for Business on premise and you're planning for this as part of a migration strategy, then the training can significantly be minimized because it is the same client. Just because we're moving from, say, an on-premise to an online service now, the client stays the same, the layout of the client stays the same, and the training for end users can therefore be minimized. Rollout plans are equally important as well. So we found that during our projects, if we empower the end users, if we empower the departments by simply informing them of when things are going to come, what the current status of the project is, they naturally take more of an interest into the project and they're a bit more eager to take up the service. So understanding how you're going to communicate your kind of rollout plans and your deployment progress. So how are you actually going to roll this out? Is it going to be a site-by-site basis? What is the expected date for site A, expected date for site B? And just informing those users so they're not overwhelmed when day one, when the consultant turns up to site and starts unplugging their legacy desk phones and starts rolling out USB handsets, and the users haven't received training, they haven't been informed of the rollout, etc. So rollout plans and communication plans are definitely crucial to any kind of deployment. But like I said, now the fact that we're not so focused on the infrastructure, we've got more time and allowance to take these kind of things into account.
I think there's quite a big piece that can sort of roll those 2 points together, isn't it? Because as soon as somebody gets wind that you're going to deploy a new telephony platform, or even just start on any project, that's when the rumor mill starts within an organization.
Most definitely.
Yeah, that's the point where people are going to start saying, "Oh, you're going Skype for Business. That means you've got to have a laptop and you have to wear a headset." And then you have all the women in the office saying, "Oh, my head into a headset," and all that sort of thing.
Most definitely.
That's the point where actually you've announced the project, even if it's only just got out through word of mouth. You've announced the project, and you need to help people through that transition period. You need to help them, just accept the change and understand what's in it for me, what's in it for the organization, because that's then going to help to get people on board with the fact, okay, so we're doing this because we're going to get some more features and functionality that's going to allow us to perhaps work remotely more, or to save some money for the organization, which could save some jobs within the organization. All of these sorts of things need to be surfaced to the people to say, this is the reason that we're doing it, because we've always got a good reason for engaging on a project. Everybody needs to understand that, understand how it's going to impact those people, and then we need to help them through the training to be able to exploit the technology so that at the end of it, you get actually the transformation that you want.
Definitely. I mean, just with a bit of a real world experience and insight, one customer that we were previously working with, a partner had delivered training for this organization. Now, the organization had delivered training based on handsets that the end users wouldn't be using, based on functionality that they weren't really as interested in to begin with. They just needed to be able to make and take telephone calls, etc. And that was the last thing that they were trained on. So generic training plans and just communicating to the end users, generic training plans don't work, but communicating to the end users, we found that really does empower them, and it helps us overcome the biggest hurdle in most of these technology adoptions, and that is the cultural change that end users have to go through. They like the way they work, and if it's not broke, then why fix it is usually the approach that's taken. So like Brian said, just educating them on why we're doing this and the benefits that they'll see is definitely important. End user devices. So these, I'm sure you could argue that each of these points could equally be number one, and that's why I purposely haven't numbered them, because they kind of are just a 1A, 1B. They're not, so there's not so much 1 and 2. They are all equal consideration points. So end user devices, they are a significant investment. So if you're not using Skype for Business already, or you're looking and you are using legacy PBX handsets, then it's more than likely that the devices won't be supported. So understanding, as again from the user profile and device exercise strategy that you would have taken out, understanding the devices that are required. So do we need headsets? Do we need cloud PBX IP phones? And if we do need that, are they on the supported product catalog that Microsoft produce online? Making sure that we've got the right devices is crucially important, because the devices, the end users personal touch over Skype for Business. They can click a mouse and drag and drop things around on the screen, but their headset is what they pick up and touch on a daily basis, and it is their physical interaction into the Skype for Business solution. So making sure that they're comfortable with their headset, making sure that they've been trained correctly on their headset is definitely important.
And just to call something out there, Corey, because you mentioned it really quickly. If you move to Cloud PBX, then what we're saying is you can absolutely have a desk phone sitting on your desk with a handset on it, and you can pick up that handset and make calls even though you're using Cloud PBX, can't you? That's absolutely normal.
Yes,
and so
correct.
You're not forced into a headset world just because you go on PBX. Cloud
Correct.
PBX,
Correct. We have got a whole raft of devices, to be fair. So from an end user perspective, we've got IP phones, we've got desk-based phones, we have got USB-based devices, we've got meeting room devices. So there is a device type to match the general organization requirements, and the Microsoft product catalog is constantly being updated with new devices, and as new vendors bring their devices and get them tested and verified for Skype for Business Online, they are being added to the catalog as well.
So really, there's a little bit of work there, isn't there, just to try and understand the requirements of the users, to make sure the users have got the right device for the job that they're doing. Yeah.
Correct, yeah, and again, a lot of it comes out of the user and device profiling exercise. So, and during that kind of exercise, it's important to elect kind of department champions, so we can get a collective view of the department and not just one person's view of the department. But all of that will come from the user and device profiling exercise, and we can again feed this into the requirements and available devices that we've got in the catalogue.
Sure.
Making sure that, and one that's often overlooked, webcams. Not everybody has a laptop with a built-in webcam, so making sure that if the users are going to be using video, again, which would have been uncovered during the user profiling exercise, have they got recommended webcams? You can definitely go to Asda and buy a cheap webcam, but that isn't going to give the end user the best quality. It's not going to be able to handle the kind of, it doesn't have the drivers that are supported by Skype for Business, so it's not going to be able to take advantage of the underlying Skype technology. So ensuring that you've got a supported webcam is definitely a good recommendation. And just making sure that the actual devices themselves, so your laptops and your desktop devices, they're actually ready to support the Skype for Business client, because there are hardware and software requirements around this, and if you are using underpowered machines, then the Skype for Business client can cause a poor end user experience, which then decreases the adoption of the solution. So let's document the environment that we're using at the moment and make sure that the requirements meet the recommended requirements outlined by Microsoft. And then another point that is equally important is how we actually measure the usage and the adoption of the solution. So how we're going to monitor the calls, how many calls are being made. There's more than likely going to have a call login solution available with your on-premise solution, so understanding how we can factor that in with the Office 365 solution, and then how we're going to actually measure the end user experiences, the usage and adoption of the solution from there. So basic things, allowing for feedback. That's one thing that is often overlooked with all deployments, but we can leverage the technology that we've already got. So it could be a simple Excel survey, it could be a SharePoint website, but just allow for end users to submit some feedback on the solution, because it not only empowers the end users, but also gives you crucial feedback and insight into the way that it's actually operating in a 9-to-5 kind of solution. So just making sure that you allow for the feedback, collect it, and then equally action the feedback as well where applicable. There's no point in taking all of the feedback in, listening, acknowledging, but then not doing anything with it. And then just communicating that with your pilot champions, just to make sure that you have got the collective view of the department, of the organization, to make sure that we're not focusing heavily on one area and turning our back on other areas. We need to get a global view of the organization's requirements and feedback of the solution. And then finally, we've briefly touched on them, so I will skim over them, but just your number ranges. So are you going to be using your existing number range? Are there any contractual commitments around that? So if you are tied into your existing lines for the foreseeable future, then again there's ways that we can overcome that, so that we can leverage the hybrid technology and the hybrid topologies that Skype for Business has available. So Microsoft have made an appliance called Cloud Connector Edition, which is a free download, and this can be used to connect into your existing environment and allow for hybrid voice, so we can still move users to the Office 365 service and utilize the existing on-premise lines while sweating out any existing contracts. And then as and when we come to the end of those contracts, we can then start considering the porting of the numbers from those lines across to the PSTN calling service. We can again obtain a new geographical range. Now it's important to make sure that all of the services are available if you are a multinational organization, just making sure that all of the services are available in all of your regions. And again, if it's not available in region X, then we can leverage some kind of hybrid topology. There's ways we can overcome each of the kind of hurdles that we may face with our number lines.
And just to reiterate what you were saying earlier on, Corey, this doesn't have to be a big bang approach. We can take individual departments or individuals, people, and migrate them from on-prem to the cloud PBX, even if it's just to sort of try out the technology.
Correct.
Or we can span this over a long period of time based on the requirements of the organisation and the existing assets that perhaps might need to be sweated, like you say.
Yeah, the coexistence phase can be as short or as long as an organisation may need. So if we do want to dip our toe in the water, then we can port a single DDI. We could have, if we're in a 10,000 user organisation, we could have one single user using the PSTN service. It can be as granular as that. So we can port a single DDI. We can port entire ranges. Or if you don't want to change your existing lines, then we can temporarily obtain a new geographical range just for the end users to leverage the functionality. And then we've got means of getting number A mapped to number B, etc., which I won't go into on this webcast because I don't want to add any technical aspects into it. But yeah, we can. There's numerous ways that we can overcome some of the hurdles with number porting. And again, like Brian says, it doesn't have to be a big bang approach. And what organisations are typically doing with Cloud PBX is adopting it on a site-by-site basis. So site A, bring site A online for a temporary period of time. There'll be calls travelling over Skype Skype to Skype rather than to the PSTN, because of course if you are a multi-site organization and site A is using a different PSTN service, then we wouldn't want to add any additional charges onto your calls. So in that instance, what we would do is would have end users educated on making Skype to Skype calls internally and Skype to PSTN calls outside of the organization, so we can again reduce those call costs.
So during that period of coexistence where you've got some users in the cloud, some users on-prem, they are actually all one user community.
Correct.
Single address book, and so they still interact as though they're just on a single platform. So to the end user, it's transparent. But
Correct.
Obviously, you're just able to move people around as the business requires you.
Correct. It gives the organisation that flexibility, but gives the end users the simplicity, which is kind of at the best of both worlds for both. Really, we can. Cool. Yeah, definitely. And then the final point that I wanted to address was just the PSTN conferencing. So, as David said, we've now got PSTN dial-in, dial-out of Office 365. So, whether or not we're going to take this on board is another planning consideration. So if you've got an existing service, again, contractual commitments might keep you on that service for the foreseeable future. But PSTN conferencing is now available in Office 365, and I'm not going to pretend to be a Microsoft licensing expert. So just confirming your current subscription and whether that actually allows you or entitles you to PSTN conferencing, and then if not, there's an actual add-on license that's required, and then that can basically deliver the PSTN conferencing to your end users as well. So
that really just comes down to, again, leveraging as much value as possible out of your licensing agreement. If you're paying for a conferencing service from Office 365, or if you can get it as a small add-on to your existing licensing, then if that provides you with some financial benefits over, a third-party conferencing solution, we all know them out there, and there's plenty of them. If it's going to provide you with some benefits, then absolutely you should be doing that, because you can guarantee that there'll be some user benefits, because it'll all be integrated into the software that they know. So you're giving them some improvements, and then you're going to get some financial improvements out the back of it, which is probably going to get that value out of Office 365 even more.
Again, it is just that best of both worlds for the organisation and the end user, so most definitely. And again, I think the key point is it is all from a single client. So everything that we've spoken about today, it operates from a single client. If your users have been using, say, Link 2013 and you're still operating Link 2013, then there are minimal changes moving up to Skype for Business. If end users are comfortable with Skype Consumer at their home, then it is a slightly separate client, but the icons and things like that are familiar. So everything that we have spoken about today all comes down to everything being delivered from a single client, and rather than having users minimize application A to wait for application B to deliver feature B, we can just deliver everything from a single unified client.
Cool.
And that brings me to an end, so I don't know if you want to take it back over, David?
Yes, thanks, Corey. Thanks, Brian.
No problem.
Yeah, so very, very quickly, because I did want to throw the floor open to question and answers. So suggested next steps. We have a thing called an architectural design session, and we have one that is focused on Skype, and we have one that is focused on voice, although there will be some overlap between the two. Basically, these are a one-day engagement with one of our consultants who will come on site, and it's a way of whiteboarding what you're looking to do, answer any questions you have, provide direction, provide strategy. And at the end of the day, we've often found that people have answered the questions they need to. What am I going to do around devices? What am I going to do around contact centers, etc.? And it's just a very nice first step on that journey to implementing a solution. The next option is telephony everywhere, which is a bit like an ADS session but on steroids. It's over a 2-day period, and from that you will get a strategy document out of it. You will get a business case out of it. It will allow you to take that back to the organisation and say, here you are, guys, this is what we're going to do. This is what we've decided on. This is going to fit for our organisation. We want to do it this way. So an ADS session, but with a formal documentation at the back end of it. The other thing I would say is, consider a proof of concept. There is a demo environment that we have access to, which is a Microsoft hosted environment which we can get customers set up on. So if you want to try Cloud PBX, you want to try out the PSTN calling, make sure it does what it says on the tin, make sure it does what you want it to do, we can help you set up. So overall, before I throw it open to questions, I know we've just run out of time, my email address is there, david.h@visual.com. So please feel free to get in touch with me. But at that point, I think I'll open the floors if anybody has any questions. Or Brian, any further points or anything you want to raise? But let's see what we've got.
Let's see if we've got any questions first of all.
Yep.
It's all very quiet.
Very quiet. We must have done an excellent job, I think. I'll convince myself we have.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Hi, it's Chris Still from Morris Components here.
Hi.
We've recently implemented hybrid with 365 Exchange and Skype for Business via yourselves, actually, and that's production rollouts in progress now. Now, recently, Microsoft have announced the Skype for Business Cloud Connector Edition, which effectively enables you to connect your online presence in terms of Skype into your existing PBX solution. I don't know whether you've been through that yet or not, and how that influences some of the possible options that you've listed out today.
Corey, do you want to get that?
I'll add any points that. I'll add any points to you, mate. So I'll let you.
So essentially, this is where, with regards to your online services, so Skype for Business from Office 365, you've got some options around your telephony connectivity. So you can either use your existing telephony connectivity that's, it's probably terminating in a data center or a comms room in your existing premises at the moment, and that would require the cloud connector, all right? Or you can say, well, I'm going to stop all of those services. I don't want a physical PSTN connection coming into my premises anywhere, and I want to receive all of my telephony calls through the Microsoft service through Office 365. So you've got two options there. Depends as to whether you've got, most people have got, let's face it, existing PSTN connectivity that they perhaps have got a contract on, and they want to, they need to just keep using that. That's fair enough. So we can do that, and we can use that connectivity with the cloud connector and still have your users homed in Skype for Business. So that's one option for you. But over time, we expect that eventually people will just say, well, actually, I don't want to pay for those lines anymore. I want to receive that service from Microsoft, and so we'll move it into Office 365.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else? No? Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Look, thank you very much, everybody, for your time this morning. I hope you found it useful. I mean, we covered a lot of information in that time. So if you've got any follow-on questions, then do let me know. We'll be following up with an email anyway, just providing you access to the recording of this session. But if you have anything else, please let us know. But if not, we'll close the meeting down. But thanks again for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.